If you go to the duel arena, there's people scamming. If you go to the Grand Exchange, there's people running all sorts of scams. And these aren't even the worst offenders. There's groups of players that will go out of their way to befriend you, get you in a Discord call, talk to you over voice, and then attempt to scam you. I exposed one of those scamming rings in a video I did a few months ago. So why is there so many scammers on Runescape? Well, today I'm going to attempt to answer that question drawing from my own experience. That is, nothing is based in fact. This is very much an inductive argument, but I've done videos where I expose scammers. I've done videos where I interview scammers. I've lurked in their Discord servers on alternate accounts, observing how they operate. Heck, I even talked to a Venezuelan who does bow scamming at the duel arena to understand why he's there and how he feels about it. We're gonna talk about that. But really, you need to note that what I'm presenting here is a bunch of inductive arguments. Nothing is fact or demonstrative, but nonetheless, I think this makes a good discussion. So I've kind of based my whole arguments off the idea that a person's online identity is strikingly more raw than a person's real life identity. That is, on RuneScape, people are able to act in accordance to their true self, since they lose the barriers of social mores, constructs, trepidations, and without these restraints in place, they're free to do and act in a way that they might not otherwise. You know, this is a kind of dehumanization, and it goes for both parties involved in a scam. The scammer is dehumanized in this way, and also the victim is dehumanized too. They're not really seeing that person in real life. Now, I don't think that this dehumanization online is inherently a bad thing. I think it can lead to people being free of some of the anxieties that would prevent them from making friendships, for example. But I do think that this does lead to a heightened amount of scamming on RuneScape, or maybe just online in general. I don't think that dehumanization online necessitates it. I just think that if somebody has a low moral compass, it would allow them to do this online versus in real life. I also think that this might be why so many people as kids, because kids have an undeveloped moral sense, would lure on RuneScape, but now as adults they wouldn't. Of course, it boils down to more than just dehumanization. I think the other factors involved are profit, group mentality, lack of consequences, and necessity. Okay, so let's break down each of these, and I'm going to be injecting a lot of my own experience into some of these. So number one, profit. RuneScape has a black market for gold, and so this opens up an avenue for scammers to sell stolen items to make real life profit. I've seen in scamming groups, sometimes they refer to this as printing. Really, what they mean by this is that they view what they've stolen as a means to get money for doing no work. Okay, so people want money, but I think this alone is not enough. Based on what I've seen, only a small group of scammers on RuneScape participate in illegal activities outside of the game. It's a small subset of them that do things like carding, that's credit card theft, Amazon return scams, stuff like that. And so for the rest of them, the reason why they're scamming in video games is partly due to the lack of consequences. If you steal from a store, society says that you're a bad person and you receive some hopefully just punishment for what you've done. The idea behind just punishment, albeit debated, is that it prevents people from committing crimes. Well, this doesn't exist on RuneScape. The worst that happens to these people is that maybe their account gets banned or maybe they get exposed in a video. That type of stuff doesn't really act as a great deterrent, and it surely doesn't stop them from continuing on in the future. For reference, I'm not talking about the person who lured 5 mil a couple of times. I'm talking about the people who have made careers out of scamming and hacking RuneScape accounts. There's some really dark communities in this game where people are literally stealing thousands of dollars a month from hundreds of players. Okay, so lack of consequences is one of the things that allows people to scam on RuneScape. There's still groupthink and necessity. Let's talk a little bit about necessity. So I asked one person who I interviewed for a previous scamming video for his thoughts on the topic, specifically related to necessity, and here's what he told me, quote, "I think being forced to make a quick decision when faced with financial turbulence will force you to learn about right and wrong in a more intimate way. Will you cheat and steal? Will you work hard? Will you do nothing and hope the problem goes away? It reveals the flaws in your character." So this is a guy who actually no longer scams on RuneScape. He was in a shitty financial situation. He originally justified it as he was in a situation that necessitated him to scam, but it weighed on his moral conscience nonetheless, and so he worked hard to get out of that situation. Now, not everybody has this type of perseverance. For example, there's an account hacker I talked to many months ago, and he told me that he actually feels bad about what he's doing. But he feels like he has no other options in life because he's a high school dropout, he has no formal education, and unlike this last person, he's really become complicit in what he's doing, and from my observation, he even feels like he's invincible, like he'll never suffer any consequence for this. And so if you ask him, he'll tell you, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore, but I feel like it's a necessity, I have nowhere else to turn. I think this is a unique insight into how scammers morally justify what they're doing. There's one other person that I've talked to, a Venezuelan bow scammer, that shared this line of thought. So I was at the duel arena, I found this person and got him to start talking to me, and on his own he started to justify, before I even prompt him to, that he's only here because he literally has to feed his kids, that he's actually a professional in real life, but there's no jobs in Venezuela. So I think this is extreme necessity. This guy really doesn't have many other options, and that has driven him to become a scammer when he otherwise wouldn't. So while necessity can drive people to scam, I think you can make an argument for at least each of these situations that I presented here, that these people could find alternatives that aren't hurting other people. For example, the account hacker lives in a first world country. He could go get a job at McDonald's. The Venezuelan bow scammer, instead of stealing gold from other players, could farm a boss and sell the gold instead. But nevertheless, necessity should be considered as one of the driving forces behind the reason for people scamming. But this is not always the case. That first person I mentioned told me that he knows scammers who have good jobs in real life, and so necessity is not in their equation. I think part of that is some scammers are definitely narcissists, or at least they have narcissistic traits. That is, they don't feel empathy for other people, they don't feel bad when they scam somebody. I think these are the worst of the bunch. For example, I did a video where I exposed a scamming ring, and it's come to my attention from the comments that now these scammers will actually link to their victims after they have scammed them that video as a way to further harass and torment that person. So the final thing that I think drives people to scam is groupthink. I did an interview with a guy who was doing some luring on Runescape. Him and his clan developed this tab scam, and I didn't include this in the video because when I asked him how he felt about scamming people in this way, and this is a common reaction, he kind of stuttered. He didn't have a way to justify it. He knew that it was wrong, but to him, he got involved with this because it was his friends, and him and his friends were out here having fun on RuneScape. I think this is an interesting insight into how this can grow into something much larger. So one thing I've observed in scamming and hacking discords is that they often treat it like some sort of legitimate business. They're sharing screenshots of what they've stolen and they receive praise for it from other scammers in that server. And so it creates this social group where everybody is accepting of this wrongdoing. And I think this helps the scammer feel not like a menace to society, and in fact even like somebody who is achieving something. They have a friend group that is supporting of what they're doing and is also engaging in the same types of activities. It normalizes it. I think that is a dangerous situation to find yourself in, especially if you're somebody who is a bit of a recluse. You maybe don't have friends in real life, and so this becomes your primary only social group. How are you going to get out of that? To scam is to not add any value to society, which is a real problem when you're talking about sustainability. For the narcissist, maybe the convincing argument is that if you want long-term profitability for yourself, being destructive is not the way to achieve that. Instead, you should focus your efforts on creating something that you can share with other people, something that doesn't hurt your fellow humans. I think this is the true key to long-term success. I like to look at the cautionary tale of Return of Wilderness. This is a guy who could have made a career out of making RuneScape videos. So many creators from his time are still active on YouTube and doing it as a full-time job, and they're making a ton of money. But instead, he chose to scam his viewers. And for the period that he managed to get away with that, I'm sure he made a ton more money than he would have normally. But now his credibility is ruined. He can't make RuneScape videos anymore, and so he's lost out on so much more money that he would have made had he chose to be legitimate. So again, I think it's really a combination of dehumanization, lack of consequences, profit, and groupthink that is responsible for RuneScape having so many scammers. I'll be keeping an eye out on the comments section to see your opinions and your experiences. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll have a real upload in just a few days.